Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this meeting of the Eastern Area Planning Committee. It's one of the 3 area-based planning committees of Dorset Council, and our remit covers the previous areas of Purbeck and most of East Dorset. For the benefit of the public, I'm Councillor Tony Coombs and I'm the chairman of this committee. If I can introduce our officer support today, we have Kim Cowell, who's the Principal Planning Officer. And then the planning team supporting her are Liz Adams, Naomi Shinkins, Kari Woodridge and Emma MacDonald. Legal support is Phil Crowther. And my committee clerk is Megan Rochester. And I'm very pleased to welcome David McGuigan, who's the district valuer. So most of them have been tidied up, but please be aware that there are trip hazards around the room from all the various cables. By attending this meeting, you are giving your permission to be filmed, and a copy of the meeting will be available on the website after the meeting, and it is being live streamed as we speak. I'd also like to thank the officers behind the scenes for making this possible today. And I'm very pleased to, as usual, to welcome members of the public to our meeting to listen to the debate and any decisions that have been taken today, and that they have the opportunity to address the committee directly in accordance with our procedures, which have been detailed on the website. Can I ask first, do we have any apologies for absence, please?
Chair, we received apologies for absence from Councillor Julie Robinson.
No surprise.
Can I have any declarations of pecuniary or other conflict of interest, bias or predetermination? David Took.
Chair, at the parish council meeting for item 7, Land at Ringwood Road, Alderholt Parish Council, I said that I was predetermined at that point. I'd already objected to this application. I still feel predetermined on that, even though it's been reduced from 0% to 15%. So when we come to that item, I'll listen to the presentation, and then after the public speaking, if I may, I will speak as ward member from the table there and then leave the room, if that's acceptable to you.
That's perfectly acceptable. You will have the standard 3 minutes as a member of the public or local member. And at the end of the debate, once the decision has been made, I'll get someone to come down and collect you and bring you back to the meeting.
Thank you.
Are there any other declarations of interest? Okay, thank you very much. You have the minutes of the meeting held on the 11th of January. They have been circulated to members in advance of the meeting and have been published on the website. Are you happy that I sign them as a true record of the previous meeting?
Great.
Public participation. I need to remind members of the public that this is a meeting held in public and not a public meeting. The first 3 members of the public, including any community or amenity group who have registered to speak for and against an application, including the applicant or their representative, with a maximum of 6 in total, will be invited to address the committee. If the applicant or their representative registers to speak, then only the first 2 members of the public who wish to speak in favour of an application may also address the committee. MPs need to register in the same way and will count as one of the 6 speakers. Town and parish councils and ward members of Dorset Council who are not members of the committee who wish to address us will be allowed to speak providing they have given due notice. All requests have to have been registered with Democratic Services by 8:30 AM on Monday the 20th of February, and each speaker will be strictly limited to 3 minutes. On the agenda we have 5 applications before us today. Have there been any requests for deferral or withdrawal, please?
Yes, Madam Chairman. Agenda item 6, page 13, Swineham Farm, Besswell Road, Wareham. It's requested that the Swineham Farm application be deferred as it's come to light at late notice that at least one landowner was not given notice by the applicant of the planning application. The deferral will provide time for notice to be served and for any material considerations raised by the landowner to be taken into account in the assessment prior to consideration by the committee.
Okay, thank you. Members, you will also be aware that at the last meeting, we deferred the application 321-1115, which is 184 Ringwood Road, St Leonards, to allow further consideration of the MPPF paragraph 58. An updated report is being prepared and it's intended to return this application to the committee next month for decision. We had originally asked for it to come back to this meeting, but a little more time was required. So it will be coming back and we will be reassessing that application in full at that next meeting. Okay. So background information relating to the applications before us today has been available for inspection by members prior to the meeting, covering consultations, objections and representations, as well as the East Dorset and Purbeck local plans and the council's related policies. So just so that people understand the way we work, I will invite the case officer to introduce the item. Members of the public, planning agents, applicants, town and parish councils who've registered to speak will be allowed to address the committee in the following order. Public against, public in support, the applicant or agent, the town or parish council, and then local member. Following the public participation section of every item, I will ask the officers if there are any salient points that they wish to clarify. I will then open up to members of the committee for questions and debate. In order to run the meeting smoothly, may I request that members of the committee direct any remarks and questions through myself as chairman. I will invite members to speak in turn. Can you please keep your microphones on mute and ensure that any devices you're using has the volume set to 0 to maintain audio quality. And please use the desktop microphones provided. At the end of the debate, I will take the vote by a show of hands, and the voting detail will be recorded in the minutes if 3 or more members make the necessary request. So we shall move on to our first application this morning, and that's agenda item 6, 316-1446, full application, land at Ringwood Road, Alderholt, to modify a planning obligation for permission 316-1446 outline. There is a full description, but I'll leave that to the planning officer to give you. So Naomi, do you want to take us through this one, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, members. So yes, this is an application to modify planning obligations of planning application 316-1446 OUT. The original outline application was allowed at appeal. Changes include a reduction in affordable housing provision, the inclusion of a biodiversity compensation payment, which should be added to the agreement, and also for the provisions of a recently approved plan associated with the development site. The application has been called to committee as requested by the head of service, and just to note, the following presentation is 17 slides, and slides are numbered on the top should you wish to refer to a particular slide after the presentation. Just by way of update, paragraphs 12.2 and 13.6 of the district valuer's report does refer to 22%, but it should refer to 15%. Also to note, there was a typo in abnormal costs in the district valuer's table, where the district valuer's abnormal cost should have been the same as the developer's abnormal costs, and a updated report is available online. So in terms of location and context, this slide shows the indicative location of the site within the Eastern Committee area. This slide shows the application site in relation to Alderholt. It is located just outside the village envelope and on Ringwood Road, and as highlighted by the star on the slide. This slide shows the extent of the application site, which is highlighted in the pink outline, and shows the surrounding features. So the site itself comprises former nursery land, which measures approximately 3.2 hectares in total. These images show the views north and south on Ringwood Road around the application site. So again, the application site is outside of the village envelope. It's also within 5 kilometres of Dorset Heathlands, and it's also within the River Avon nutrient catchment area. In terms of the site history, again, the outline permission, it was refused by the council in 2016, but it was allowed on appeal in 2017. This is the site edged in red on the slide. It allowed for 45 dwellings, and this was the number of dwellings were conditioned by the inspector as part of that appeal decision. Other sites which are also relevant are the Sang site, which is edged in blue. This was approved in January 2020, and I'll discuss this later in more detail. And also to note, there is a reserve matters application for the outline permission, which is currently under consideration. So this is the reserve matters plan that was submitted for the site. And again, this is under consideration as part of a separate application, and it is not before members today. Again, a reminder that the outline permission was allowed an appeal in 2017. Again, we have a reserve matters application currently with us for the site. In terms of the proposed amendments to the previously agreed legal agreement, this table provides a summary of the amendments to the 106 agreement that was secured at outline, again allowed an appeal. As mentioned, it includes the reduction of affordable housing to 15%, the inclusion of biodiversity payments, and again, the provisions for the SAG associated with the development. So in terms of the changes to affordable housing, the applicant did initially propose to reduce the affordable housing from 50% to 0%. That was what was initially submitted. It has been demonstrated by the district valuer that 15% is viable, and the applicant has accepted the recommendation of the 15% affordable housing provision. In terms of biodiversity compensation payment, there is a requirement to pay over £16,000 in compensation, and this was agreed with the Natural Environment Council's Natural Environment team, and it is due to a lot of hedging within the site. And this would be added to the legal agreement where financial contributions are required to be secured by legal agreement. In terms of the SANG provisions, the additions to the 106 would include the prevention of occupancy of the associated development until the SANG is delivered. And it also allows for clawback provisions towards affordable housing should the developer sell additional SANG capacity credits. So just as a reminder to members, the outline application was allowed an appeal in 2017. Permission was granted for 45 dwellings and conditioned as such. The reserve matters application is under consideration, but is not before members of its committee, and the Highwood SANG was approved in January 2020. What is for consideration are set out in blue on your slide, and these modifications again are to reduce the affordable housing from 50% to 15%, to include the biodiversity compensation payment, to include the SANG provisions, and there will also need to be an increase in SANG maintenance contributions to just over £1 million. So in terms of local representations, 28 representations were received and objecting to the proposed changes. These included general objections to any reduction in affordable housing that was agreed by the inspector at appeal, and that affordable housing is needed and necessary in the area, particularly for young families, and that some provision should be retained if at all possible. In terms of consultee responses, so objections were received as highlighted on the slide, including objections from the parish council and the ward member. The housing officer has objected to the loss of affordable housing, but has agreed the proposed mix if 15% is approved. And the district valuer has reviewed submitted information and advised 15% affordable housing is viable. So in terms of viability, so this slide highlights the key changes in viability that have been considered, including changes to the build costs, associated with changes to the revenue, abnormal build costs, new building regulation requirements, phosphate issues in the River Avon, and the addition of the SANG. So in terms of the SANG requirement, the requirement for the SANG was not necessary at outline, and the condition to keep the number of houses at 45 was set out by the inspector, with the view of not requiring suitable alternative natural green space for the development. The requirement to provide the sign for this particular site was only raised by Natural England in objection to the reserved matters application that's currently under consideration. So that reserved matters application was submitted in 2019, and when submitted was policy compliant, providing 50% affordable housing. And again, the sign requirement was raised by Natural England to address the cumulative impact of development on heathland sites in the Alderholt area. So as noted previously, the applicant has submitted an application for Sangland, and again, this was approved in January 2020. The cost of maintaining the Sangland is approximately £13,000 a year, and the developer will need to privately maintain this for 80 years. So in terms of phosphate costs, in a similar vein to the mitigation for Dorset Heathlands, Natural England has objected to new residential development in Alderholt, given the uncertainty about the impact of additional development on the water quality of the River Avon through additional phosphates from sewage discharges. This was not an issue when the outline application was approved and was raised as a concern in 2022. So the applicant has sought to address this issue by providing mitigation in the neighbouring authority of the New Forest District Council, where credits can be secured for development in the Dorset Council area. So, as noted in the officer report, paragraph 58 of the NPPF has been considered, and officers considered these particular circumstances justify the need for a viability assessment. Given the circumstances, significant weight is given to the viability statement submitted.
Can I just clarify one point? When you're talking about the SAN, you keep saying that it was granted in 2020, yet the presentation shows that the application was registered in 2020, but it was granted in January 23.
Apologies, I meant to say 23. In my head, I was saying 23. Sorry.
That's right. I just wanted to make sure so that people weren't confused.
January
Thank you.
23, the sign was approved. So the council has employed the District Valuation Service, or the DVS, as I will refer to them, and to provide an independent assessment of the viability appraisal. The DVS has reviewed submitted information and is of the professional opinion a 15% affordable housing provision is viable. So a summary of the submitted viability information compared to the DVS assessments as set out in this slide can be found in the officer reports in paragraph 1511 or page 42 of the published report that was available online. So some key points that have been considered in the DVS appraisal, and that includes the fact the DVS has adopted a higher gross development value and a lower benchmark land value than the applicant. The approach to adding 8 to 8.5% build costs and revenue is agreed and is in line with current BCIS build costs, which are used in terms for viability assessments. A additional submission was made by the applicant to argue build costs had increased even more, but this was not agreed with the DVS. The costs for new building regs are agreed, but an additional £65,000 for an association have not been included. The developer also sought to increase phosphate costs during the course of the application, but this was not agreed, and the original cost was used in the assessment. And finally, the sign costs will be taken on by the developer, as the council or local groups do not want to take this particular sign on, so hence the sign will be privately managed, and the cost is with the developer for the 80-year perpetuation period. So in summary, the DVS assessment concludes that a 15% affordable housing provision is viable. This is in the form of 2 two-bedroom and 5 one-bedroom apartments. The developer does not agree with all parts of the assessment. However, they are willing to accept the 15% recommendation, and they're also willing to include a viability review as part of the legal agreement. And the developer has also agreed, they've agreed to include the viability review clause. So in terms of the proposed mimics, it is acknowledged there would be a loss of 2 and 3 bed houses, and as a result of the reduction in the affordable housing provision. But however, given the number of affordable dwellings to be provided, it's considered acceptable that they are provided in the form of the apartment block located within the site where 7 units will be included. And this would work in terms of the requirements of a affordable housing provider and in terms of management requirements. All the apartments will be affordable rented dwellings, so there won't be any intermediate dwellings, all affordable rented dwellings. And the Dorset Council Housing Officer has been consulted and advised that the proposed mix is acceptable, where there is a need for 1 and 2 bed affordable dwellings in the area. The slide before you now shows the build sequence, and the proposed affordable housing will be provided in the earlier stages of the build, where we can see the developer intends to start this part of the site, and we can see the apartment block would be in the earlier stages of the build. But again, the developer is willing to include a viability review clause in the legal agreement if approved. So the final slide in terms of the recommendation is to grant permission subject to the completion of the legal agreement, which would secure the points set out in the slide. So to reduce the affordable housing from 50% to 15%, to include the viability compensation payments, to include the sound provisions, and to increase the sound maintenance contribution to just over £1 million. And that is the end of the presentation.
Okay, thank you very much, Naomi. I'm moving on now to the public speaking, and my first public speaker is Chris Walker, who's speaking against the application. Mr. Walker, if you'd like to come to the table. Have you been shown how to use the microphone? Just press the button when you're ready to speak, and you will have 3 minutes from the time you start your.
I was going to object to this, but I think all the points that I was going to raise have been covered in the presentation, so I'll withdraw what I was going to say. But just apart from the fact that most of the villages of Alderholt are very disappointed that this site has been allowed to get this far. And I'll stop at that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I do understand the feelings. My next public speaker is Robert Lofthouse, who is the applicant.
Very much, Madam Chair, councillors, thanks very much for the presentation. I'll just counter through a bit of a chronology just to reflect on where we are. In November 2017, as has been explained, a 6-day public inquiry was held to look at the outline planning application, and planning permission was granted. That inquiry considered many issues, including whether the development was likely to have a significant effect on Dorset Heathlands. The inspector concluded that it wouldn't, on the basis that the scheme would be limited to 45 homes rather than the 60 originally proposed, that being below the threshold under which on-site suitable alternative natural green space is required. Involving Homes exchanged contracts to purchase the site in April 2019, and following pre-application consultation, our application for the approval of reserved matters, the 45 houses were submitted in October 19. This provides for 5 1-bed, 15 2-bed, 23 bed and 5 4-bedroom homes. In December 19, Natural England provided a consultation response questioning whether the council had any deliverable heathland mitigation to address the impact of this development, to be funded through STIL. As a direct consequence, we were left in the unenviable position of benefiting from planning permission for 45 homes, but the council being unable to approve the details of the layout, the appearance and the landscaping of these homes solely on the basis of the lack of heathland mitigation. The council has now refused permission for more than 40 more homes in Alderholt on the basis of this lack of mitigation, including single plots and 100% affordable housing schemes submitted by a housing association. Since spring 2020, we've sought to identify a scheme by working with local landowners, the council open space team and Natural England, and last month permission was granted for Highwood South. The full cost for the acquisition, establishment, management and maintenance in perpetuity rests with us. This is the single most significant driver for us approaching the council to seek to agree to reduce the proportion of affordable housing on the site. This hasn't been taken lightly, and the council have rightly asked for a third-party expert advice to advise the council and the representatives here today. A subsequent matter which you'll be aware is that nutrient mitigation now necessary, and that in particular relates to drainage and to Fording Bridge and phosphates into the River Avon. This was raised by National England right into the council in March 21. We now have a scheme which has been endorsed by National England and to which New Forest District Council have already entered into an agreement, and that will provide mitigation for the impact of housing development served by Fording Bridge. As a local house builder, our desire is to build homes. That's our business, and we continue to do successfully endorse it, including at Potterswood in Burwood, where we provided 80 affordable homes, and a further 19 affordable homes are coming forward in that phase 3 of that development. And at Fonthill Magna, where we're delivering 12 affordable homes in that neighbourhood plan site. We've identified, and it's been agreed by our expert, that 7 affordable rented homes can be delivered here, and that 10 is the local priority. We've also suggested.
Can I ask you to sum up, please? You've had your 3 minutes.
Okay. Your officer's report and the presentation has explained the unique circumstances of this development, the timeline of events, and that they have rightly sought outside evidence to critically review the development. We sincerely hope you'll appreciate the circumstances that we've faced and the effort and time taken by us and your officers to address the delivery of these homes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My next public speaker is Gina Logan, who's chairman of Alderholt Parish Council.
Thank you. At the moment, how to use the system. I was expecting to put forward a case objecting to zero affordable housing on this site. So I'm quite pleased actually to see the officer's report suggesting that 15% of affordable housing can actually be provided. As already stated, the original application was successful at appeal, and this was contrary to the development being outside the village envelope and at odds with the current local planning policy A1. It was agreed at condition 18 that there could be no more than the 45 properties, as mentioned again at 44. When looking at that appeal decision, the inspector gave great weight to the delivery of housing as a social benefit in paragraph 94, and in paragraph 95, the inspector emphasises the affordability, the provision of 50%, emphasises affordability and the provision of 50% affordable housing, to which he gives substantial weight, as during the previous 4 years, there had been very limited delivery of affordable housing. In paragraph 10 of that decision, the signed unilateral undertaking stipulated 50% affordable housing, not up to 50% affordable housing. The loss of any affordable housing will be detrimental to the village, which has already lost out on the affordable housing site on the surplus store site. Although that was granted permission in 2014, it still hasn't been built out. Affordable housing is necessary for the good of the community in allowing and enabling local people to live and work within the local area. Without it, housing is priced beyond the reach of ordinary families. And that's borne out on the Dorset Council website, which showed in 2021 that median house prices were 9.5 times the median household income. Thus, the proposal today to retain 15% affordable housing, i.e. the 7 units, as opposed to the 22 under the 50% level, is to be welcomed, as it will go some way to alleviating the total lack of affordable housing provision over many decades in Alderholt. I hope that the decision on this application considers the value of affordable housing in more than just monetary terms, and that members will support the proposal for the 15%. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My final speaker this morning is Councillor David Took, who is acting as local member for this application.
What a good view from here. Thank you, Chair. Couple of points. First of all, the mix that is being proposed is not very good. The need in Alderholt is for families. So 1-bedroom flats are not the need. The need is much more for 2, 3, even 4 bedrooms. And I've raised this at previous committee meetings. And the spreadsheet on page 42 was in pen. This application was up for appeal, as has been mentioned. And at that time, the developers gave a unilateral undertaking making provision for delivery of 50% of the dwellings as affordable housing. And as Gina Logan said, not up to 50%, but 50%. The developers have always known they must provide mitigation. Paragraph 57 of the appeal decision confirms that these may be by way of a SAM or, quote, other appropriate avoidance mitigation, unquote. National England wrote to the Council on 6th of December 2019, objecting to the reserve matter application, as they had insufficient information regarding the actual mitigation, pointing out that paying a levy does not provide actual mitigation. The paragraph 58 of the appeal decision references policy ME2 in the 2014 core strategy and confirms that sites of approximately 45 million, approximately 50 dwellings or more that are expected to provide SANGs as part of the infrastructure of the site. So no such site is not an on-site SANG that's been proposed. The SANG is 2 kilometres away, and I'm not sure why that didn't come to a committee either, because both I and the parish council had reserves about it. However, it was approved last month. Dorset Heathland's SPD supplementary planning document requires mitigation by way of Heathland infrastructure project. That may take several forms, not merely a SANG. So if you look at the Appendix A, Part 2 to that document, provision of BMX facilities is offered as a possibility. And certainly Alderholt, a number of BMX riders creating their own tracks on private land, which has been a cause of concern. It's a great shame that an approach like this was not looked at. However, Part 10 of the appeal decision references the unilateral undertaking, making provision for a contribution to heathland mitigation, approval by the council and specification of open spaces, the delivery of 50% of the dwellings as affordable housing and education contributions. And in light of the unilateral undertaking, EVDC, the local planning authority at the time, did not pursue reasons for refusal relating to affordable housing.
David, come to the end of your 3 minutes. Can I ask you to sum up, please?
Okay, provision for affordable housing is consistent with the key to the site. They're committed to 50% and nothing has changed. The inspection applied substantial weight to that 50% affordable housing. And I can simply say that in light of that, this should be refused and 50% should be retained. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to ask Naomi to respond to any salient points from the public speakers. You're welcome to stay for that. And then obviously you will need to go and find yourself a cuppa. Naomi.
Just a couple of points from both Councillor and Councillor Took. Yes, the inspector did put significant weight on the 50% affordable housing provision. However, the circumstances have changed since then in terms of the Heathlands, the cumulative impact objection from Natural England and on-state requirements, which again came about after a reserve matters application, a policy compliance reserve matters application was submitted. Paragraph 58 of the NPPF does allow for the demonstration of particular circumstances should the viability, should a non-compliant scheme be submitted. And those circumstances, we believe, have been demonstrated in terms of the sign costs, the phosphate mitigation, and the other rising costs that have been included in the district valuer's assessment. Just also to note a point from Councillor Logan, in terms of affordable dwellings, all the 7 dwellings to be provided will be affordable for rent. Normally there would be a 70-30 split between an intermediate rent and affordable to rent. They will all be affordable to rent. back to councillor Took in terms of the proposed mix. That was discussed with the housing officer. The housing officer has advised actually the most need at the moment in Ardwold was actually for 2-bedroom dwellings. After that, it is 3-bedroom dwellings, which I appreciate we're using, but the housing officer also advised that they don't often get 1-bedroom affordable to rent dwellings, so actually they have no objection to that provision. Again, all the dwellings to be affordable will be affordable for rent. In terms of 45 houses, this was conditioned by the inspector. In terms of the SANG, it wasn't required at appeal. The inspector specifically conditioned the number of houses to be 45, so that a SANG or HIP requirement wasn't needed. There was actually an application after the outline that was allowed an appeal, before that appeal was allowed, which reduced the development down to 45 houses. And actually, if the officer report on that one, Natural England had no objection to 45 houses at that time in 2017, subject to sufficient public open space within the site. So again, it has come forward as a result of the 2019 objection after the reserve matters was submitted. And just in terms of the SANG application, that is a separate application, not before us today. There is an officer report available online that sets out all the details of that, including the distance from the development site and why it is acceptable. And I think that's all my points.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
The first speaker is Shane Bartlett.
Okay, always a little bit nervous with the smile that I get when you say that. Okay, the tables on page 42, I'm struggling with, Madam Chairman, not being an expert in this field, and thankfully we've got an expert in the room. There are queries around that. I think it would have been helpful for the members to have been taken through that table to get a great understanding of it. If like me, they're struggling with it, but certainly we've got several lines within there: benchmark land value and residual land value. The alternative use value as well, and an acronym of the EUV. I'm not entirely sure what that is. Now, I didn't see anything within the report that was explaining those differences within the amounts, and I just wondered whether I could have an explanation of that. There's a benchmark land value as compared with the residual land value. It might be worth having some explanation around that, Madam Chairman, please.
I'm going to bring the district valuer to answer those questions.
Yeah, happy to do so. So the benchmark land value is effectively a land value that, in my opinion, incentivises a reasonable landowner to sell the land development. And then the residual land value is actually a residual sum of my appraisal based on the tenure mix. So in this particular in the table, we have done that on 100% of the market scheme. So the residual land value, so the residual land value there is in excess of the benchmark land value, which would indicate that the scheme is viable. Because there's that over 400,000 excess of the benchmark land value, then it indicates that it's probably enough if there are enough surplus to provide some affordable housing, which the residual value would be sold at a lesser rate than the market value. And that took away the residual land value to reach close to the benchmark land value. That's how the viability is assessed. You also asked about the alternative use value. In this instance, because there's an outline scheme, application that's been approved on the site, I looked at kind of the alternative use value being that development. And that was very difficult. The reason why the range is so broad there because it's an outline scheme and there's not much detail there. So a lot of assumption that's been made in terms of what the units would be, you know, there was no accommodation schedule for that and everything. It's just kind of an outline scheme. Hence the range. And that's an alternative use value, which is all in the mix of consideration when considering the benchmark land. EUV, that's existing use value. Apologies for the acronyms. So the existing use value there, and that is basically, I think, itself for evaluation date, assuming it's existing use opportunity. It's not a hope value or any other valuation issues at play there. It's just as it is in this case, kind of nursery land with a bungalow. Needing some attention. That's existing use value. The way that's considered as well, you see there we've got almost 2.5 times the existing use value is the premium to get to the benchmark land value. And in the RICS guidance, if you look at the existing use value, the guidance is look at the existing use value as a starting point and then see what amounts of premium being able to incentivize the landowner to sell that for redevelopment. And there, in my opinion, we've got 2.35. Quite an efficient figure, but there's a lot of other things at play, including in terms of use value. There's multiple.
Does that answer your questions?
That's lovely, yeah. I think I've got a bit more of a grasp of it now. So, I see that existing use value then. So you've got a mathematical formula, which is the other pieces are played into that to give you the 2.35 times the existing use value, which then gives you your final figure. Okay. So essentially what this comes down to then from, in your view, is, Madam Chairman, is that the developer has paid £450,000 over the odds for the land from the outset. Is that a fair comment?
Would you like to respond?
In actual fact, the developer has paid for this site. You see there the purchase price just over 3 million. I believe that's back in 2017. And that purchase price reflects what was paid for the site at the time, without those extra costs that have come since then. So the benchmark land value, away from the purchase price, really is kind of what I think it was selling for today, or its valuation date, with all the extra costs going. So if the developers come into this price today rather than 2017, what would they pay for the site as it is, based on the planning that it has, and costs associated with that actual development on the site? So it's heavily reduced from what was actually paid. That's due to the additional costs that apply.
Yeah, please. So, okay, so the purchase price was 3,048,000. And today's value would be 1,950,000. You got that right?
The 1.95 million is the opinion of the developer, their applicant, and their representative, who represent themselves. And the 1.5 million, that's my opinion.
Okay.
Don't have any other members wishing to speak at the moment, so Alex.
Which one am I going to grab for? Can I just have a couple of questions, because I'm a bit. SANG capacity credits, what are they? One. Assuming that we gave it permission for the SANG happened in January, it is not up and running yet. What's the timescale on that? And that is a solid commitment that's not going to go back if this, are the two so linked that one is in danger of the other doesn't happen. And phosphate mitigation, again, is this just a monetary mitigation, or is there any design issues on this site which will help to mitigate on site, or is it just basically paying you Forest District Council some money and they'll sort it? That sort of slightly worries me. It's sort of down there as a cost, but not as an explanation. So I'd like an explanation. And also on the slide you showed of the proposed, which as we know is all reserved, so we don't know if that's actually going to happen. What is the open space on the site? Are there play areas, open space?
I'm going to rule that out. We are not discussing that today.
All right.
Application is probably going to come to us anyway, so.
I'm just intrigued about.
Have a look at the image in front of you, might help answer your question.
The mostly gardens. Thank you.
Yeah, so in terms of the first point, sign capacity credits, the sign, Highwood sign, which the applicant has provided and get approved in January 2023, has capacity to mitigate for the development itself. Natural England have also advised it has capacity to mitigate for heathland impacts for an additional 38 dwellings. If the developer was in the future to sell those sign credits to other potential developers looking to get planning permission in the area and they have to provide mitigation for impact on heathland, one of the reasons for reducing the affordable housing provision is the cost of the sign. So if they were to then start getting money back by selling those credits, we are allowing for provisions, should that happen, that we receive contribution towards affordable housing. So the sign credits themselves is a potential mitigation that the developer may be able to sell. None of this has been actually agreed and confirmed yet, but should it happen, we're allowing provisions that if they are to make money in that, given the reduction of affordable housing, that we can then get a monetary contribution from that to go to our affordable housing pot.
Okay.
In terms of sign timescales, again, that's a separate application approved in January 2023. There are the typical planning timescales on it where development must commence within 3 years. The legal agreement that we're looking at today in terms of the sign provisions that would be included means that there would be a clause saying that the development with the reserved matters can't be occupied until that sign is delivered. And there's a whole process set out in the 106 for the sign application, which sets out how we have sign off and completion and everything else for the sign. And once the certificate of completion has been issued by the council, and they would then be able to occupy the development of the reserved matters. In terms of phosphate mitigation, that is within the New Forest District Council area, and the developer has taken a fish farm out of use, and this has instantly removed a number of phosphate loading on the River Avon. It's primarily provided by them within that area for their developments in that area, but there is the opportunity for Dorset Council applications to be able to buy these credits, surplus credits, which provides mitigation, and that's all been agreed with Natural England. Natural England are apparently very happy with the proposal, because in terms of phosphate mitigation, taking a fish farm out of use, it automatically or immediately removes the phosphates from the phosphate going in obviously are stopped. Unlike other sort of projects such as wetlands, etc., which take it out of the river. So by stopping it, you instantly remove the extra loading. I think that was everything.
What's your queries?
The bit about phosphate is very welcome. I might see that one. So my understanding is, Chair, with sounds like there's a sort of amount of houses it can help mitigate in terms of open space, but they don't have to be this particular site. Just thinking, so other sites can benefit from this sign, or if their developer had a different site, they could use this sign. It's not totally tied to the one site.
I think I'm going to play safe and let Naomi answer that one.
So, for example, not necessarily if there's additional credits. So, strategic sign, for example, that can be provided by the council can be used to mitigate for a number of sites. The capacity of a sign is assessed by Natural England. They're based on the size, the existing public access already to the Sound, and how much additional public access that will create, etc. And that's all assessed by Natural England, and they tell us what capacity it has. So in this instance, it allows for the 44 net dwellings to be proposed on the development site, plus they've said an additional 38 dwellings in the area.
Thank you. Jen, you wanted to come back?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yeah, it's a good question for the officers surrounding the change obviously in the viability, going from 50% affordable being produced on the site to 15%. I want to gauge how strong is their opinion that if we refuse this application, developers win that on appeal because of, I'm presuming, the independent advice that's come from the land valuer puts the developer in quite a strong position. So could I just get a gauge of an idea? There's a reason for my direction question, but I just look at different officers as how strong they feel. The council authority feel risk.
So we're not Ladbrokes, we can't give our.
You can't give it, okay.
Yeah, I think that's pushing it a bit too far, Shane.
Have you got any other speakers, Madam Chairman?
No, it's just you at the moment.
Okay. So we've had sites like this before where we've got viability issues. We have in the past on occasion asked for the for a condition that we can go back and look at the profits on the site to see whether or not we can change the amount of affordable housing being provided. However, there's a risk in that if my understanding is that if we do that, potentially we could get less than 15%. Is my understanding. Yeah. So I contacted the housing team to get the latest figures on homelessness. And as presently it stands at 99 households in B&Bs from 350 in temporary accommodation. And just for January 2023, the housing team have been notified that there's a further 405 households at risk of homelessness. That's just for January 23. And the cost of the council at the moment, the cost of the council, therefore, for a residential council taxpayers is in excess of 1.5 million a year. Now, we've continually had developers come back and say at a later date after they've had outline approval planning that they then can't fulfil the viability agreements and the person that gets it is social and affordable housing. The reason I'm saying this in a public meeting is because it needs to be out there for the residential population to understand that as a statutory planning authority position we're put in time and time again, and as local and as councillors sitting on the planning committee, the in the position that we're put in. I'm also this, which I'm really not happy about. What I would ask, Madam Chairman, can a condition be put in that on completion of the development, because the developers come to this committee with the view that it's no longer viable because at the moment the markets are so volatile and the build costs, which it relates to on page 39, is it possible to put a condition in on completion of the development, if sufficient profits have been made, this council authority can claw back some of money for affordable housing that would be provided on another site at a future date?
So you're going to answer this one. I think that falls your court.
Chair. So essentially, the applicant is asking for a variation to the existing one, obligation for reduction in affordable housing. The first point I'd make is if you were minded to accept the application in principle but are concerned about less affordable housing being provided, you could decide that the viability review was a one-way, so it was a minimum 15%. Obviously, the applicant could submit a further application or appeal that decision if circumstances changed. And then to answer your specific question, yes, essentially, the that would be what you were suggesting in terms of a clawback would effectively be a viability review at the end of the scheme seeking additional contributions. And again, that could be a requirement of the revised obligation that you could decide to include. Again, I would say, you know, there's if this is is this a section 106A application?
MPO. Yes.
Yes. So the applicant has a right of appeal against your decision, and also if the market changed dramatically during the build out time, they could of course submit another application to vary. But in short, yes, those kind of obligations are possible.
It's a good advice. Where do you want to go with it?
You have no other speakers, Madam Chairman. You have no other speakers.
Not at the moment.
Okay, Madam Chairman. Then I think I need to bring this to a close because I think the report I don't think there's much room for manoeuvre for the committee. So I would at this point propose that we accept the officer's recommendation within the report, but a condition is put in. It's maybe subject to the wording from the officers because I don't have the wording. That the officers would put a condition in that on completion of the development, sufficient profits have been made, then the council authority would be entitled to a clawback of whatever percentage that is, that's going to be determined by the officers, in order for affordable housing provision at some future date on some future site.
Thank you, Chair. As you usual with these, where members are suggesting a departure from the wording of the recommendation, we need reasons for that. And just to be clear, this would be a term of section 106 obligation. It wouldn't be a planning condition. Not looking at planning conditions. There's a legal distinction between the two. So I just want members to be aware. Strictly speaking, there is a differential, but what's being proposed would be a term of the obligation for planning condition.
It's reasoning, Madam Chairman. Okay, so the reasoning that the original 50% affordable housing under now through volatile markets has now been through the independent district valuer that only 15% affordable could be returned on the site. Because those markets are so volatile, things could change to positive. That means the developers could make increased profits that would enable them to actually deliver more funding towards affordable housing to meet Dorset Council's need for homelessness. And I'll read the figures out one more time, which I think gives sufficient evidential base to request what I have, and that is that 99 households are in B&B, 350 in temporary accommodation, and a further 405 households already this year in January 2023 are now at risk of homelessness. That's the official figures from our own housing department. The cost of the council, and therefore the cost of the residential council taxpayers in the Dorset Council area, is in excess of 1.5 million a year to accommodate that. I believe that this council authority can afford to support developers' profits at the expense of our council taxpayers.
Please.
Thank you, Chair. I completely understand the rationale behind what the council of Barker has said. However, the reason for this decision on this application and to add that the additional requirement have to be based on the development and the application. It's not this developer's fault that the homelessness numbers are what they are. That's an issue for the authority, and we can only base the decision on the council's planning policy and the to this site and its viability, not factors which are very important but not related to this application.
last time.
Okay, Madam Chairman, I fully appreciate it's not the fault of the developers and the situation they're putting through a volatile market. However, to my knowledge, we don't hear developers come back and offering more money when they build out a site and they make huge sums of profits. And so we cannot, we had a budget debate last week within the full council chamber where we're in the top 3 council tax areas within the country. And we're hoping to drop out the bottom 10 with a balanced budget that we think we've got on the table that we've put forward and we've approved. As I say, I don't hear developers coming forward and saying, you know what, we made a massive amount of profit on this development, here's some money back. I think this is an opportunity where we're giving the benefit of doubt to the developer, build out the site. If the markets have relaxed, if the markets have improved and actually get increased profits on the site, then I think there's a moral obligation on us to try and secure funding for affordable housing that we're losing on this site at present because of certain market conditions at the moment, but that might improve in the future. I'll stop there.
I think from everything that you've said and everything that I've heard, that the applicant has already confirmed that they're willing to include a viability review as part of their legal agreement. And that's more or less what you're asking for, although perhaps you've gone into greater detail. I think there's an issue as to the timing of the viability review and whether we can ask that the legal agreement includes whether it's partway through or at the end of the completion of the development. And I'll get some advice on that, please. But I think most of what you're asking is already covered by the agreement to include viability review clause.
So in terms of the viability review clause proposed by the developer, that is on 80% completion review. So you're not too far from the end of the development, and that's 80% completion within 4 years. And so that would include the affordable housing provision would be included in that 80% as well. So it is close to the end of the development build out. And there is a time clause in there already as proposed by them.
Okay.
Sorry, I think you said it was at 8% of the build out? 80. Like nothing today, sorry. I've made a proposal, Mr. Chairman.
Would you like to remind us? I think we've been so much questioning.
It was at the completion of the development that under viability, sufficient profits have been made, then the council authority would be entitled to a clawback on those to provide funding for future affordable housing on a different site in the future. And obviously that wording and that percentage of clawback would be worked out by the officers, Madam Chairman.
My understanding is that well, from the legal advice we've just received, it needs to be within the life of the build, and 80% is, as proposed, is towards the end of the build, significantly towards the end of the build, and that's 36 of 45 homes. So I don't believe we can propose the completion part of your suggestion. We could potentially change it to 90%. We can change it to 90% of the bill.
I think a good fashioned British compromise of 90%. Help us move this debate along.
90.
Robin.
But something else had a stab at this. Just see how complicated these things are, Chairman, can't you? You know, what you think would be quite a simple application, there's so much, but this particular application has been really fraught with, say, difficulty. It has a really checkered history because it's a site which I believe was not originally an airport, the East Dorset Core strategy. So it started off on the wrong foot in a way. I'm saying it in the nicest possible way. And it's gone through all sorts of processes, as we've heard. And in our position as committee members, we're not the experts. We make the decision based on the information that the experts give us, the officers, etc. And we have to make a judgment on that. We've had all the information. That table, which was very, and I thank you, Shane, for asking for some enlightenment on that. I thought it was just me. Where can we go with this, Chairman? We can't, you know, we've gone from the applicant originally going for being told he must do 50%. Then there was a comment somewhere, it's on page 39, 15.2, it could have been reduced to 33%. This was in 2021. So we've gone from 50%, which would have been 22 houses, then approximately 22 properties, to 33%, which would have been 15. Now, the applicant wants to go for 0. But the district valuer, who we have to rely on that information as a professional, and that part of the information gathering that we have, has said no, 15% would be okay on this. So where do we go? We say no, okay, until we come back with a higher figure. We've all heard the phrase half a loaf is better than no bread at all. At the moment, we've got from the original, we've got a third of a loaf. So do we accept that? Shane, have you put a proposal? Did I hear that right? Yeah, reluctantly, I would second what Shane said, because I just don't see where else we can go. I don't see other option we have. We've got something here, albeit very small amount, and I don't think it's going to go away. If we, for some reason, refuse this morning, gave reasons for refusal, I don't think it would go away. I think we're looking at it again in the future. But we're not allowed to conjecture, are we here? So I'll second it with those additional comments.
I think we're in a very difficult position. You've already heard that from the appeal decision at 50%, you've had the objection from Natural England and you've had the changes to building regs, which puts us in the position where we are today. If we push the future forward, who knows what else might come in the meantime. So I think you have to make a decision on the information you've got before you today. So I've got a proposal that we grant according to, do you want to put the recommendation up on the screen, please, Naomi? So we grant according to the officer recommendation with the addition of the viability review at 90%. Yeah, so all in favour, please. And those against? 3. I make that 6 in favour and 3 against. In that case, the application is granted. Thank you. Are you going to go get David? Thank you very much. Item 7, as you will be made aware at the start of the meeting, has been deferred. And that will come back at our April meeting.
No leeway.
So we will now move on to agenda item 8, which is EFUL 20-04609 Wareham Riverboats. So just bear with us while we do a bit of swapping around.
Yeah, deja vu.
Yeah, I am. But the chair. What it
Yeah, absolutely. They've gone to meetings. It has to
I didn't do it.
No bit.
He's going to wait to Councillor Tipper. He doesn't hear our whole presentation. Thank you for your input into that one. Yeah, I shared. Oh, sorry.
This one, this is looking after me. Rather party, obviously. Well, the chair. Steve Winter. No. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Human nature.
Yeah. That's one. Right. Oh, this is one.
Councillor took on his way. We're waiting for him so he can take part in this item. We're going to have to move. We can't sit here all day and wait. Carrie, do you want to start the presentation, please?
So this application has been submitted by Wareham Riverboats to the replacement of the existing temporary storage blocks of the permanent building. Due to the size and the siting of the replacement kiosk is also locate the existing historic Amberwood water pump to a different location on the side. The application is being considered by the planning committee today because the site is located, which is the council-owned land. The application site is located in Wareham on the southern edge of the settlement, adjacent to the River Frome. You can see it here. The application site is outlined in red. Just to the south, we have the River Frome and Southbridge crossing here. And there are some views of the site itself from across the Water Meadows and Causeway. Wareham Town Centre is located to the north here, and Wareham Quay to the other side of the bridge. And just here in purple is the extent of the council-owned land, which essentially matches the red line at the application site. So this slide illustrates how many constraints and designations affect the application site. But the key ones for consideration today really are the settlement boundary here, and also the conservation area boundary, which is the red dotted line here. And the application site is just inside that here. And this plan just shows in a bit more detail the extent of the conservation area, which is the lighter red. And then within that, you can see the darker red hatch is the number of listed buildings in this particular part of the conservation area. And this includes here the old granary, which is not right next door to the application site on the quayside here. So here's an aerial view of the site with the listed building, the old grain store here. And the information, there's a long history of temporary consents relating to this site and kiosks having temporary consents approximately every 3 to 5 years. And the most recent temporary consent for the existing kiosk was granted in 2017. It expired on 31st of January this year. So just to give you some context of the application site. So the site is here, photograph here, just looking across the river from the south. And this is looking eastwards along Abbott's Quay, and you'll see the old granary store here, listed building, and the site is just tucked in behind that on the quayside. And this is looking southwards from Wareham Town Centre towards the application site, which is on the right behind these buildings here. And this is the other side of the quayside, so Wareham Quay, and just give you an indication of some of the historic buildings on the eastern side of the bridge. And just some more photos. So the application site is here. This is South Bridge, and you can just see the existing storage kiosk in light blue. And again, here's the existing storage kiosk, and adjacent to it at the moment, the historic Bamford water pump. This photo at the bottom here is the site within the summer. This is actually taken from the applicant's supporting statement, so you can see how well the site is used. And just some further context, the existing Bamford water plant that's proposed to be removed as part of the application. And just for information, example of another kiosk on Wareham Quay to the other side of Southbridge. So again, some sort of general context photos of the existing kiosk in blue and the area of the quayside with benches and seating. So these are the existing and proposed plans. So the top plan here is the existing kiosk, which is quite small in nature. And here's the existing Bamford plant, and then the proposed kiosk, which will also sit in the same location on the quayside, but is substantially larger. Because of the larger kiosk, it's proposed to replace the Bamford water pump to the other side of the quayside here, right next to the bridge and adjacent to the seating area. This is just zoomed in a bit so you can see the difference with the existing kiosk is essentially a sort of locker storage container, and the proposed kiosk is larger with a veranda, and it also includes an engine store, another store, and an office with wash hand facilities due to obviously the implications of COVID recently. So the applicant has advised that the proposed kiosk will meet the requirements of his new 25-year site licence and also long-term business aspirations for the site. It is the applicant's position that the space required is the minimum necessary for the business, and as I've already explained, it would provide wider facilities including an office with wash hand basin, equipment store, engine store, and also a covered veranda area here to the front for staff. Opportunities to reduce the scale of this kiosk have been discussed with the applicants and they have been dismissed. The existing kiosk is small and it has a footprint of approximately 8 square metres. And you can see that the proposed kiosk is substantially larger with a footprint of approximately 24 square metres, some of which include the veranda, open-sided veranda to the front here. And essentially the new kiosk being so much larger inside will fill most of the quayside to the side of the old grain store, which is the listed building here. So the existing kiosk as well is pretty much a small sort of shipping container, metal storage container. It has a flat roof height of approximately 2.3 metres, shown on the top plan. And the proposed kiosk will be taller, with eaves height of about 2.2 metres and a total ridge height of approximately 3 metres above the finished floor level. So these just give you an example of the proposed front elevation of the kiosk. So this is facing towards Wareham Quay and as would be viewed from the bridge. The building itself is proposing an oak frame with timber cladding and a zinc roof, and the materials are considered to be acceptable. However, the application site is in a prominent riverside location and is particularly visible from the town quay, Abbots Quay and Southbridge, and also from the views from the AONB and River Pass to the south of the site. The proposal has been discussed with the Design Conservation Officer, and it is considered that the proposed increase in the size of the building is significant and would appear dominant within the quayside location. The building is considered to form an incongruous addition to the riverfront location and also for the accessible quayside, conservation area and the historic townscape setting. Whilst the height of the kiosk would remain subservient to the adjacent listed building, just as we find here, the enlarged footprint and built mass is not considered to positively integrate the building with its surroundings or conserve and enhance the setting and character of the local area. Officers therefore consider the proposal as contrary to policy D and policy LHH of the Purbeck local plan. As the application site is located within Wareham conservation area, officers consider the proposed kiosk would result in a level of harm which is less than substantial to the significance of the townscape setting and conservation area. It has been necessary to weigh the level of harm against the public benefits of the proposal due to the conservation area setting. So officers note that in determining previous applications for the temporary structures on the quayside, assessments have taken into consideration the contribution that the boat hire business makes to the vitality of the quayside setting, particularly during the summer months, and the strong positive contribution it makes to the character of the conservation area. However, in this case, officers considered the level of harm to the setting of the conservation area and the adjacent listed buildings would not be outweighed by the limited degree of public benefit associated with the seasonal level use. Therefore, the proposal is considered to be contrary to policy LHH of the Purbeck Local Plan and also the objectives of section 16 of the NPPF. So as already mentioned, the proposal includes the relocation of the historic Bamford Water Pump. This has been altered to a more accessible location. So currently it's approximately here, you can see on the top plan, and it's to be relocated here and adjacent to the existing seating area and benches. Other considerations include the impact on neighbouring residential properties associated with the new store. The nearest residential property here is the old grain store, a listed building. However, as the use is long established through many temporary consents, officers don't consider that a permanent kiosk would result in any demonstrable harm to the occupiers of this property. It is noted that there are economic benefits of the business to the local economy, both as a source of local employment and also the future economic business itself, and wider contributions towards the economy and tourism of Wareham. And this is in accordance with policy E and TA for Purbeck Local Plan. A further consideration is flood risk. The site is located within flood zones 2 and 3. However, as the proposal constitutes a less vulnerable use in terms of flood risk, and it is considered that flood resilience measures could be included in the building, there is no objection from the Council's flood engineer, and the proposal is considered acceptable in accordance with policy FR of the Purbeck Local Plan. So no neighbour comments were raised in relation to the proposal. However, Wareham Town Council did query the ownership of the application site and raised concerns over loss of public access to the quayside as a result of the larger building. As I've already mentioned, the site is located on land owned by Dorset Council, and notice was served on Dorset Council prior to the submission of the application. So in summary, although the proposal would support an existing economic enterprise, officers consider that the benefits of the proposal are outweighed by the harm to the heritage assets due to the scale and visually dominating appearance of the building in the sensitive conservation area location. As such, the officer recommendation is one of refusal for the reasons set out in section 17 of your committee report. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Okay, we have 3 public speakers. The first one is Matthew Jones, the applicant. You have 3 minutes, sir.
Good morning, councillors. Wareham Boat Hire has been operating from Albert's Quay since 1950. My wife and I have been working there for 10 years. With 20,000 visitors a year, the boat hire is a considerable public benefit. Currently, there is an ugly metal kiosk situated on Albert's Quay, for which temporary planning permission has been granted many times. Council has requested that a planning application for permanent structure is made. Keen to oblige, I contacted architects who gave an estimate of £75,000 for a structure to be built. The conservation officer was consulted and we were advised that no pre-application would be required. In 2014, due to the cost of the build, I requested that our lease be extended. Unfortunately, it became apparent that the council did not own the land, they merely possessed it. Council, therefore, could not extend the lease nor grant permanent planning permission until ownership was settled. It has taken 8 years for Dorset Council to obtain legal title to Albert's Quay, obtaining title in 2022. They have granted us a new 25-year lease. The lease states the tenant may, at its own expense, build a permanent structure to be approved by the landlord. As no pre-app was required, I asked architects to submit a planning application. The application was refused. I would like to address the objections made by the Conservation Officer. Point 1, the Conservation Officer's primary concern is an increase in mass. The existing structure requires us to spill out onto the quay. Life jackets and equipment need to be unpacked onto the quay in order for employees to enter the kiosk. The modest increase in size will result in less disruption. In order to meet health and safety objectives these days, we hold approximately 100 life jackets, 10 life rings, other equipment, paddles, oars, 10 engines, fuel, etc., all which have to be contained separately. Not to mention a place for employees to sit out of the weather. The proposed size is the absolute minimum we need to trade within our health and safety requirements. The repositioning of the Bamford pump has been addressed and resolved, and we employed a specialist surveyor at considerable cost to address the water levels. These have also been resolved, I understand. Finally, if I may, the concerns raised by Wareham Town Council. The statement made by Wareham Town Council demonstrates, with respect, a misunderstanding that the ownership and leasing of Abbots Quay. Members are concerned by the potential impact on the slipway. Dorset Council Legal Department have addressed the slipway. The right of the general public is assured in Schedule 2, Reservation 2 of the lease submitted to Land Registry. Members sought to establish who owns Abbots Quay and recommended an investigation. There is no need for an investigation, councillors. Dorset Council own the quay. Members sought to establish whether the plan was factually correct. The plan was prepared by Dorset Council Legal Department and has been registered with Land Registry.
Mr. Jones, you've had your 3 minutes. Can I ask you to sum up, please?
Certainly. I would suggest, therefore, it's safe to assume that the plan is factually correct. The Land Registry title ensures there is no loss of access to the public. Consequently, the objection raised by Town Council should be dismissed as unfounded. The proposed design represents a huge improvement on the existing metal kiosk. We've given a great deal of consideration to the proposal, speaking with neighbours who are keen. We wish to build a structure which is fit for purpose and only a few square metres large.
I'm going to cut you off now. You've had nearly a minute over.
So, Chair, thank you.
Thank you. My next speaker is Councillor Bob Dean from Wareham Town Council. Again, so you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Our objection as Wareham Town Council is related to the legal position of the public slipway, which forms part of the application area. We recognise certificate B was served. However, it was not clear to the spatial extent of ownership at that time. The slipway has a unique history and function as one of the only few public slipways serving Poole Harbour and River Frome. As such, and given its importance to local residents as well as visitors and tourists, the Town Council felt it had to ensure that its duty to keep public access was not being compromised in any form by the proposal or the further commercial activities of the applicant. It was noted that the slipway was separate from any proposed building works. It is clear, I believe, from the wording within the officer's report, which implies that the land in question and the slipway is ultimately owned by the Dorset Council, and plans which have been shown today have confirmed that. Therefore, I am happy to say that our overall legal concerns are sorted, but we do still wish to see that clear public use of the slipway retained in the long term. This is a very sensitive position, and it's very dear to the local people of Wareham, and so therefore we would feel that we had to make some comment in this respect. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And my last speaker is local member Councillor Beryl Ezard. Again, Beryl, you have 3 minutes.
Thanks, Chairman, and thank you for letting me speak. I'm also a member of the Wareham Town Council. I'd like to say that I have considered this application as it has got a complicated history And it has given pleasure on the river of lots of visiting boating enthusiasts. However, as the Wareham Town Council said, this is a public space, and actually shown by the planning officer, it shows that all the boats take up all of the area. Now, we have had some of the local folk complain that they can't launch their boats there, or they can't fish off there, or they've got no access when all the boats and kayaks are there. And this has been a bit of a bone of contention over the years. But I must say that the main reason that I have considered this long and hard, the permanent building proposed is too large, as placed on Abbots Quay by the Frome River in Wareham's historic and conservation setting. It will spoil the local scene. I therefore cannot approve of this application and agree with the Wareham Town Council and the planning officer to refuse it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Barry. Officers, is there anything that you wish to come back on from what you've heard from any of the public speakers? Okay. Shane, I understand you wanted to make a declaration.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, for openness and transparency, I am presently the Town Council representative on Green Boats at Riverside in Wimborne, which is a charity organisation that comes under the Fishing Wimborne Charity, which I'm also a Town Council representative on. It's not in direct competition with Wareham Boats, and it does not do any targeted marketing against Wareham Boats. I've spoken to the solicitor for the committee, and I believe I'm okay to take part within the debate. Thank you very much.
I saw a nod of agreement there. Okay, members, over to you. David and then Alex.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, looking at the picture there, that blue kiosk looks a little bit 70s, bit naff and nasty. I was intrigued by the applicant's comment that when they want to use it, they've got to empty everything out of it, all the life jackets and paddles and everything. They're going to be spread across the floor. Now, surely that's going to present hazards to people around the area and look poor. The whole purpose of planning, and I'm sure I get this right, is to make places better, not worse. And I'm struggling to work out how a permanent building and removing that rather ancient bed is making things better. I don't think so leaving that there is making better. I think removing it and putting something permanent there would have a beneficial effect on the way it looks. So what can I just confirm that when it's in use, there is actually a scattering of equipment adjacent to it, and what sort of impact that has on users of the quayside and the slipway? Thank you.
Are you able to answer that, please?
The bottom photo here gives an indication of site in use during the season. Certainly there are sort of more boats around. In terms of general impacts on the public, I have passed the site, but if I'm honest, I haven't taken particular notice in previous busy seasons of whether there's any sort of negative impact on the public using that side of. So I just come back into the sort of principle of the structure that's there at the moment. Officers acknowledge that replacement of the existing structure would be a benefit to the quayside and conservation area in the historic setting. I think it's not the principle we're objecting to, it's more the size and the scale within that particular location.
What's your question, David?
Almost, but not quite. If what we've heard is that the size proposed is the minimum size required to be able to keep all of the kit inside and not scatter it around, then that's more or less predetermines the size of the building, doesn't it? You couldn't be smaller and gain any benefit. And I'm just struggling to see what the why there's a negative impact on the conservation area. I think I'd like a little bit more detail as to why you think it's a negative impact rather than improving it.
I could just take you back to the proposed floor plan. It shows at the top here we have some engine storage area and then essentially equipment store, which is obviously necessary for life jackets and things that have already been mentioned by the applicants. However, the new proposal includes quite a large office space with wash hand basin. And in addition to that, we have the external veranda area along the front of the building, which certainly doesn't benefit the existing storage container. So as an officer, I have gone back to the applicant and asked whether they need all of this space, whether, for example, the veranda could be removed, but the applicant is insistent he requires the entire space area proposed. And on the basis of that particular size on the quayside, and taking much of the quayside and the historic setting, that is why the conservation officer has raised particular concern. It's more that size and the height and the mass of the building and the historic quayside, as opposed to the principle of a new structure, which of course would be an enhancement to the area. But perhaps a new structure that isn't of this particular size and mass.
Okay, does that satisfy your questions? Yep, I'll move on to Alex then.
Thank you, Chair. I suppose, I'm not quite sure if it's an interest or not, but I have, my family have hired boats from this place in the past, and I have in the last few years used the public slipway with our own canoe and not had that impeded at all.
I think the fact that you're using it no more or no less than any other general member of the public does not make it a problem for you. If you'd be in a position of management, that would be different.
So I do know this area quite well. And that blue shed definitely needs replacing. Looking at the floor plan there, I have slight issues with the veranda area, because of course that would mean that you then couldn't walk down the side of the building and sit on the slightly raised bit there where the cursor is, thank you, and which is your sort of access to slightly deeper water. Children do regularly, dabble bits of bread in the water to see if they can find a fish and such like. And of course, that side of the slipway would then become far less publicly accessible. But on the whole, I think it is a very good plan. If you showed that slide again where you have side-on views, I think you would say that it was a distinct improvement and not a problem. But there would be a slight loss of public access to the fishing bit, as opposed to off the bridge. So I am slightly concerned about the veranda, but the rest of it I have no problem with at all.
Thank you. My next speaker is Shane Barber.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I just want some information. Bradford Pump, present site it's on. Is that the original site we know about from? I couldn't see it in the report. Whether it was to move it to another site, but when you showed the photo of it, it almost looks like it's been obviously a point of interest, of local interest. It looks like it's been, for want of a better description, being charted up from the past, the brick put around it. I'm just wondering if that's on the original site, or it's just been plonked there as a sort of public curiosity.
My understanding is that the pump has been moved several times on the quayside, and so it's not its original position where it is.
Chairman, have it go back to this question over less than substantial harm, and obviously a subjective view within the conservation area about the damage and the impact of the applications before us. I'm afraid I didn't write down the number of slides, but you had a slide previously that showed the present container and the new build, proposed new build. On front on when you looked at it, I do apologise, I didn't write down the slide number. Yeah, that's the one, yeah. And as I said, this is subject to you, and I am really struggling to see how this is detrimental to the conservation area as opposed to what is currently there. I really don't understand it. On page 55 of section 6, it talks within MPPF about building a strong and competitive economy. At section 12 about achieving well-designed places. Paragraph 84-86, supporting a rural economy, promote sustainable growth, supports sustainable tourism. At page 56, development that is well designed and that is not well designed should be refused. And that does look well designed to me. I appreciate why the canopy is there for inclement weather for operators. But I know we're discussing around the size of it. But in order for all of those things that I've said, for a business to run operationally, and if that's what they believe that they need to run operationally, then I don't think that what is being proposed is actually out of consideration. I don't think it impacts significantly on the area to cause me that much concern with what is already there. I'm sorry, there's not a question wrapped up in that. It's just my subjective view on it. I do apologise, Madam Chairman. I know there are any questions at the moment, but it's going to be impossible for the officers to answer because where I'm sitting and where they're sitting, we have opposed views, and I don't see it, Madam Chairman. I'm sorry. It's probably not very helpful.
No, it's very helpful, but I'm just going to clarify one point. I don't separate questions and debate. If you wish to speak, you should speak. Okay. My next speaker is Robin Cook.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you very much, Councillor Bartlett, for finishing my question about the location of the pump. So I was going to ask that, and thank you for the answer. So I can see the conservation officer's issue with this, because when you look at on slide 14, we've got there, fortunately, when you're looking from the bridge or from that side, you see quite the existing structure apart in a way, but it's quite an attractive site with a pump set against the old grain store building. You know, it makes a bit of a feature, a bit of a. Suddenly you're going to lose that and have a building which actually is needed. I mean, there's no question that there's a proven need to have this and encourage the business to flourish. You know, we've got more and more staycations, more and more people want to use facilities either locally or visitors. So there's a way we must encourage this where we can. The proposed view there is a bit over dominating against the side of the old grain store. You've lost the pump, obviously, to an unsighted area. If they could compromise, and I know we talked about the size that was discussed, and no compromise could be reached, but it is going to be a compromise maybe later on. I think it's the roof line of the proposed structure which actually detracts in a way. If there's a way that could come back with a different roof line, maybe a flat or a slightly angled, slanted roof, lean-to type roof, might have less of an impact against the old grain store, which in itself is not an unattractive. The stonework is quite good and it's worth a view. So that's something I think we should consider. I'm not very supportive of the officer's recommendation, I'm afraid.
Councillor Cook, you know what I'm going to say, that we have to deal with what's before us.
I do know that. I just had my thoughts.
We can't redesign.
No.
If you're not happy with it, then you
I'm not
refuse
happy
it. If you're happy with it, you grant it.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's no issue. It's not the same place. Yeah. I've just had a reminder from the officer point of view that there is absolutely no issue over the principle and the fact that the existing container needs to be replaced. The issue for the officers is the size, not the design, not the materials, not anything else. It's just too big in that location. And that is why the recommendation is as it is before you. You have the choice to either accept that or to grant it.
Yeah, fully understood, Chairman. I would withdraw all the way around. I put the comments okay, but yes, it is over dominating, I must say, in the form that it is there.
Councillor Dyer.
Yeah, just to add to that, Chairman, we don't normally grant permissions if we consider something is excessive in size on the basis of need, because you could argue if somebody wants a household extension in the green belt, but is considered excessive, we wouldn't take any notice if the applicant said, well, that's what I need. That's not the main planning consideration. So I think what I'm saying is that I agree with Robin Cook.
Thank you. Alex, you want to come back?
Can I just come back? The land belongs to Dorset Council, but the proposed building will be a permanent structure. So will that then be on a sort of 99-year lease, 29? I mean, I just sort of wonder about the future of the building if it goes through.
25 years.
Can it be sold to somebody else? And can we make sure it never is, or only to run the business? I mean, just intrigues me.
I think that might be outside the remit of planning, so I think Phil might want to come in on this.
Thank you, Chair. That isn't a matter that's before you today, and I'm not a property lawyer, so I don't know the ins and outs of the lease that has been granted. My instinct would say it becomes part of the leased property, and when the lease determines, the building would revert to the council of land.
Okay. Thank you. Can I just throw some? Oh, right. Personally, I do not have a problem with this. I think that it, whatever you put there would have to be bigger than what's already there. So actually, I would propose accepting this. I'll throw that out there for you all.
Then the next to speak. Do you wish to second the proposal?
I will second the proposal, Madam Chairman. Do you want to read it? Come back later.
I think the officers are going to need conditions. It's very difficult when you keep being passed notes and you can't read the writing. Yeah. And you're off the hook on this one. It's the proposal that needs to give the conditions of grant.
I would say the proposal is granted because it will not cause less than substantial harm to the building, but it will promote and improve commercial activities in the area. There is a need. How you phrase that?
I think I would translate that as the impact is outweighed by the public benefit. Is what you're trying to
much better phrase.
Got a whole raft of hands. Shane, you wanted to speak, and then David, but first, Phil.
Thank you, Chairman. I think just in terms of the reasons, you say that everybody, including the public and the applicant, would understand the reasons. I think you need to be clear whether the proposal is on the basis that either that there is no harm caused to the listed building or the other heritage assets, and therefore it's a normal, and therefore it would revert to a normal planning judgment, or whether you do consider that there's less than substantial harm to heritage assets, and that harm is outweighed by the public benefits. I think you need to be clear on which basis you're making it, how you're applying the heritage test, and then how you're making the planning judgment. And if you do consider that there's no harm, I think you need to explain why.
Alex's proposal, let Alex finish and then I'll come to you.
I would say it does not cause harm to the heritage aspects around because it is considerably better than it was before. The roof line echoes the roof line of the listed building behind. With the open access, open aspect to this one actually makes the quay a slightly more welcoming site than having a metal bar. So I think it's actually an improvement. So I think a benefit in terms of the atmosphere. So therefore, That's my page.
So just to button it down, last time,
Sorry.
that you're saying that there is no harm, or are you saying that there is harm? However, that harm is outweighed by the public benefit.
I believe there is no harm.
That clarifies it. Jane?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yeah, I'll go along with that. I thought it was less than substantial harm. Probably good to accept that there's no harm. My reasoning for supporting the proposal is, as I already said previously in the debate, page 55 within the MPF document under section 6, building a strong and competitive economy. Section 12, cheap and well-designed places. I think this is paragraph 84 to 86, supporting a rural economy, promoting sustainable growth and support sustainability in tourism. Any development that is well designed should not be refused. It's obviously an improvement on cost there. There's no historical precedence for the siting of the pump, so there's no issue in my view on moving the pump. It is a public curiosity that's been moved in the past. So I'm comfortable, Madam Chairman, to support the proposal, and I think that's reasonable consideration to be taken into account against the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. David Took.
Chair, I think I'd also support Grant on this. The current thing that's there is a bit of an eyesore, and I think it actually improves the way that the historic environment is presented by removing that and getting a reasonably attractive building put there. In terms of the size, the comment was made earlier about not normally worrying about need, but I think we do need to worry about need. Paragraph 8 of the MPPF talks about economic objectives, social objectives, and environmental objectives to achieve sustainable development. And this seems to me to be sustainable because it, as Councillor Bartlett says, that there's an economic objective that's met here, and there's a social objective supporting strong, vibrant, and healthy communities. So I think that this actually improves the look of the place. I don't think it causes any substantial harm, or certainly less than substantial, very much less than substantial. I don't know how you phrase that. Any development, anything put in a conservation area is going to cause anything new. Conservation officers will always regard that as causing some harm, because job title is the job title, it's conservation. But I think to say that this is very trivial harm would be more accurate. And the proposal seems to me to meet the objectives within the NPPF. And I think I would support granting this application as opposed to refusing it.
Thank you, David. Yeah, although you have talked about some level of harm, the proposal on the table is that there is no harm. So, just for your information.
Well, that's fine. I mean, define harm, please. Define harm, because I can see. I can't see any harm, but anything in the conservation area.
And that's the proposal on the table, that there is no harm. Okay, so we have a proposal that's been seconded to grant this application. We need conditions, the usual ones of timescales, plans, materials, and there may be some others that Liz is thinking of.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I think we would recommend probably 4 conditions. So that we already mentioned, timescale is statutory, plans, and then these 2 on the screen before you now. The first being about materials. If members are minded to grant, then we would want to control those materials in the long term. That's why the wording is as it is, and
The other one is to ensure that the pump is relocated as proposed. Thank you.
Okay, so you have a proposal to grant being seconded with conditions. Yes, please. Impressive. I need to double check. Proposer and seconder, are you happy with the proposed conditions?
Yes, Madam Chairman.
Yes.
Right, good. Nothing like being on the right side of legal. So we have, as I said, proposal to grant, which has been properly seconded with standard conditions plus these two actually that you can see on the screen. Those in favour, please. Seven in favour, those against? 2, 3. Abstentions? None. Therefore, that is carried and the application is granted. Thank you very much. Okay. Moving on then, our next application is agenda item 9, PFUL 2022-04531, and that's Halton Heath Garage. You will recognise this as you have dealt with two previous applications.
Oh, yeah.
And Kari is going to take us through this one as well.
Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this application is the extension of the existing Class E return unit at Halton Heath Garage. Members may recall approving a second application based on the forecourt and provision of new islands and fuel dispensers back at the planning committee in December last year. This application, as with the previous application, is being considered by the planning committee because the council owns part of the site on frontage Wood Wareham Road. The application is located to the north of Organford and Halton Heath Industrial Estate and south of the Baker's Arms roundabout on the A35. The site is accessed directly off the A351 in Organford. And as you can see here, Halton Heath Industrial Estate is accessed from the roundabout here. And then opposite we have the Royal Navy Cordite Factory and the Baker's Arms is further to the north here. But the site is currently unused for general petrol sales and officers estimate it's been in this position for the last 20 years. However, it is understood that the former owner has continued to use the site to fill in vehicles associated with haulage business, and so the use hasn't been abandoned. Okay, so the site is located in the countryside, it's outside the settlement boundary, and it's also within the South East Dorset Greenbelt, which you can see in green hatch. And the area of land in purple here defines the council-owned lands, and the garage, so the shop building is located here to the rear of the existing canopy. And so here's just an aerial view. This is the existing canopy that was discussed for replacement back in December. The shop building is located to the rear, and you can just see it in the darker grey outline here. So in terms of general context, we have the Halton Heath part to the rear, and then further to the north is an existing MOT test centre and commercial vehicle sales. So just some quick photos as a reminder of the site. So this is the southern access with the existing canopy and the shop building. You can see a white render finish to the rear. And this photo directly from the front, but the shop building just sat behind the existing canopy. And the northern access to the petrol station site, which also serves the Park Home site to the rear. And just some more photos showing the surrounding area, and obviously the front elevation of the existing building, the existing access from when it was used as a shop. This far end here was previously in use as a workshop associated with the business. And you can just see the sort of access door there to the former workshop use. And these are just some photos of the rear of the site, which is fully enclosed with fencing along the access road to the Park Home site, and a fairly tall block construction wall to the rear. So this is the existing site plan. So at the moment, the access to the shop is in here, and the shop area and then the workshop area. And here is the proposed site layout plan. So the proposal is to extend the retail element further into the workshop element of the building, and also a single-storey extension at the rear here. The extended building will provide a storeroom, office and toilet facilities in addition to the retail space. The single-storey extension to the rear is modest in scale, approximately 14 metres long here and 4.5 metres deep. And it will increase the overall footprint of the existing building by approximately 57 square metres. The officers considered that the extension is proportionate in scale to the existing building, and being located to the rear here is relatively well screened as well due to the enclosed yard area. So these plans to show you the building as existing with the existing canopy, and then at the bottom the proposed building. It's proposed to slightly increase the overall height of the building as well by approximately 0.5 metre. So the building height will be about 4 metres to here. And then I've just tried to indicate here that the lower edge of the canopy, which will have a height of 5 metres. So the canopy that's already approved will be approximately 1 metre taller on its lower edge. But the canopy itself will continue to screen the building. And as you can see from the photos, a new shop entrance access is proposed here with new shop windows as well. As already mentioned, the increase in canopy heights, and these are the rear elevation, just to give you an indication, would partially screen the building from Wareham Road. On the rear elevation, you can see there's quite a substantial reduction in the number of windows serving the building. So as already mentioned, the site is in the countryside. However, officers considered that the proportionate extension is acceptable in accordance with policy CO, and that the small-scale employment intensification and provision of a wider community facility is of benefit. The extension and the proposed alterations to the building aren't considered to result in adverse visual impacts on the building and its setting. This just gives you an indication of an overlay to try and show the approved canopy in relation to the amended shop with the increase in height and extension. As you can see, it's just set behind here. So the site is also in the green belt, and national policy considers new development to be inappropriate except in very special circumstances where purposes of openness and permanence of the green belt are retained. One of the exceptions listed in the NPPF is the extension or alteration of the building, provided it doesn't result in a disproportionate addition over and above the size of the original building. And officers consider that this proposal falls within that exemption and would not result in any additional visual or spatial impact on the green belt. So in terms of the character of the area, we have some residential immediately surrounding it, but also some commercial uses to the north. And the proposed alterations and extensions aren't considered to harmfully impact on the existing character. The reuse of the building and the general enhancements are also considered to be resulting in betterments in terms of general appearance. So no neighbour responses were received to this particular application for the shop extension. However, you may recall neighbour responses raised concern to the canopy and the petrol pumps previous application. Largely about concern of intensified use and impacts on the highway. The Parish Council for this application have requested that security lights would not be left on all night, and that opening hours are restricted. So in terms of disturbance to neighbours, obviously the site is in a fairly busy area on a busy road, and there is already some impact, and officers don't consider that the retail extension within the shop would result in any detriment. Environmental Health have been consulted on the proposal, as with the previous application, and they consider it's reasonable to restrict hours of use of the premises and for delivery to between 6 AM and 11 PM. And this would match the conditions that are already on the use of the petrol forecourt. In terms of highway impacts, the site, as mentioned, is served by 2 accesses to the north and south. So the application for this one also takes into consideration car parking provision. 8 spaces are provided in total, so 7 along the front here, and a disabled parking space right next to the new access to the shop. There's also provision for cycle parking to the front of the shop here. As with the previous application, a traffic assessment has been submitted and this has been fully considered by the highway engineer, and there are no objections to the proposed retail extension. So other planning considerations include impacts on drainage and potential unexpected contamination, and conditions are recommended in respect to both these issues in your reports. So in summary, the proposal is considered to be acceptable within the countryside and the green belts and in respect of all other material issues. And the officer recommendation is one of approval subject to conditions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Carrie. I have one public speaker, and that's Beryl Izzard, local member.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I actually, this is a retail convenience store, which is really a good addition to Wareham St Martin Parish Council. I support this application with the conditions requested by Wareham St Martin Parish Council, bringing this derelict brownfield site back into use as especially convenient for older folk living next door in the Holton Heath residential park. And there's about 65 park owners there who have had to walk more than a mile to the nearest shop in Sandford, which is on 1351, which is a very busy main road. It's also situated where the big Holton Heath trading estate is nearby without any convenient retail shops. It will relieve the travel congestion through Sandford of vehicles visiting Sandford purely for food and fuel, as that has a filling station and a food store right in the middle of Sandford on the busy bit part. The site will enhance and improve the amenity of this site along with the filling station already granted. I therefore fully support this application to be granted. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Beryl. Okay, members. Shane, first speaker.
Thanks, Madam Chairman. As was reiterated, this site did come before us as a separate planning application in our recent planning meeting, and we had an extremely lengthy debate over that application before us then on this new present application. And I should commend the officer for an exhaustive and very good report, which has left very little opportunity to actually ask questions around the site. My personal view, which is probably why my other colleagues on the committee are struggling with other points, I have to say. So, Madam Chairman, I think this is coming from an issue over the fact that part of the land is also council-owned land. Reading through the summary recommendations within the officer report, the proposal to comply with the MPF and policies of the local plan 2012, proposal for development that is not inappropriate within the Greenbelt countryside, the proposal is accepted within scale, design and visual impact on the character and appearance of the area. There is not considered to be any significant harm in respect of neighbouring residential amenity, highway safety, ground contamination or drainage flood or risk. And there are, most importantly, in the officer's view, there are no material considerations for the refusal of this application. So I think you can probably guess where I'm going with this, Madam Chairman. I'm proposing that we approve to grant subject to the conditions laid out in the officer report, Madam Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. 2 speakers lined up. Next one is Alex Brenton. Are you going to second?
I would second, but could I just, as a quick, there's nothing in the detail about whether or not there'll be any EV charging points at this place. Is that a consideration that would be? But yes, otherwise I definitely second.
The application is for sure.
David Morgan, you wish to speak?
Yeah, well, Alex has taken what I was going to say. I'd just like to follow Councillor Bartlett's very thorough report on this site. And as we've said, we've already discussed it at length some time ago. So I was going for second, but obviously Alex knows the site better than I do, so save me a little 5-minute run. Thank you.
Thank you. David?
Just a question, if I may. The detail I may have missed, but this has come before us because it fronts Dorset Council land. What effect on Dorset Council land, if any, is this application going to have? Can I just clarify exactly?
No more or less than the previous application we granted for the canopy in the garage. So basically, no impact at all. It's just about right of access.
Thank you.
No further speakers then. It's been proposed to grant and seconded as per the report. Those in favour, please. Unanimous. Thank you, members. So, our last application today is agenda item 10, and that is the HOU 2022 06160 3A Lighthouse Road, Swanage. And Liz is going to take us through that one. Liz.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, members. So this application is a householder application, and it's another one that comes before you because part of it is on council-owned land. So the proposal is for some changes to the dwelling and then a new vehicular access onto Lighthouse Road. The application site lies in Swanage, so within the OMB. And here you have the plan that shows the land that's owned by the council in purple. So application site is in here, and you see Lighthouse Road is all within council ownership, as is Delston Road to the east. The existing dwelling is located in the centre of a nice spacious plot, and currently vehicular access is via Delston Road to the east. And you can see from these photos that Delston Road is unmade and it has a very rural character. This access, which serves the garage, is to be retained. And until recently, this was the only vehicular access serving the property, and they had a pedestrian access to Lighthouse Road. Lighthouse Road itself has a more urban character, this section of the street, until you travel further south down to Delston Country Park. And these photos show the approach to, along Lighthouse Road. And you can see on the western side of the street, it has generally chalet style dwellings set back in sort of smaller plots than to the eastern side. Local perfect stone walls contribute to the character, but these are broken by access drives. It's proposed to create a new vehicular access from Lighthouse Road, as shown here. So the part in blue would be gravel, and then over the existing verge, which is council-owned land, would be a tarmac entrance. This has required the removal of part of the perfect stone wall. You can see here that works have already commenced at the applicant's own risk. Swanage Town Council raised some concerns regarding this element of the scheme in terms of the loss of some of the wall. Approximately 5.5 metres needs to be lost to achieve visibility requirements, but 18 metres along the western boundary is to be retained or either replaced or repaired with the original stone which has been retained for this purpose. And this is considered by officers to ensure that the impact of the new access on the street is minimised and the impact on the wider area of the is acceptable. As you'll see from this area, hopefully, most other properties on Lighthouse Road do already benefit from an access. So this is not an unusual request, and nor will it appear incongruous, but it does have some impact because of the loss of some of the greenery, which has been raised by neighbours as a concern because of visual impact. So it's proposed that a condition is imposed to require the replanting of a tree to soften the impact of the new access, and the condition is imposed to ensure that the proposal to reinstate the majority of the boundary wall takes place. With those conditions in place, the officers are satisfied that the proposal would meet policies D and LHH of the permanent local plan. Highway safety concerns were the reason that there was a condition originally to prevent any vehicular access being created, but there's no objection from your highways officers, subject to a condition relating to the provision of returning area on the site so that vehicles can exit in forward gear, and also the retention of visibility. So land ownership is obviously a matter that falls outside of planning legislation, but an informative note would remind the applicant that permission of the landowner is required in respect of the creation of the tarmac area, and the visibility displays should any work be necessary. But as the visibility displays will utilise the area already grass verge, no works are anticipated. So the proposal before you also includes works to the dwelling. This photograph is of the front, the western elevation of the property facing Lighthouse Road. So you can see the pedestrian access that already exists. And the flat roof element here is just to be replaced, and an existing metal balustrade is to have a glass balustrade there. So that's shown on this plan here. And it's in the roof. And then there's also a proposal for a single-storey flat roof rear extension and small side extension as well, and that is to include a balcony at the rear of the property. So given the spacious plot and the subordinate nature of the extensions, these can be readily incorporated without harm to the character of the area or the AONB. The sea works have already started on the rear extension, which would be PD bridge development, and in any event, the side extensions and the any works which other works require planning permission because of the AONB statement. Just to show you the relationship with the adjacent house to the north, this is Delston House here, and they are in quite close proximity of about 3.5 metres building to building. And this property has a small balcony on the eastern elevation. So officers were originally concerned about potential for overlooking from the new balcony. However, the revised scheme, which shows a 1.8 metre high screen here on the northern boundary, will prevent any harmful overlooking. So as set out in the officer's report, it's considered the proposal is acceptable in accordance with the development plan, subject to the conditions set out for you. So these include the reinstatement of the boundary wall, matching materials, the provision of a replacement tree, and the biodiversity enhancement and highway safety measures previously mentioned. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much for that very succinct presentation. We have no public speakers. Bill, you're the local member. Do you wish to speak now or as part of the debate, or do you wish to start the debate?
Just kick off the debate, Madam Chairman. Could the officer just confirm that the town council did not conclude that this was an undesirable proposal, although it regretted the loss of part of the wall? I'm racking my memory as to what precisely was said. It's probably in the notes, but could you just confirm the town council's view of this? Because my recollection was that it didn't, although they were a bit concerned, it did not amount to opposition to the application itself at the end of the day.
Bill, it's on page 90 of the agenda.
Thank you. Can somebody tell me what it is?
I'm finding it for you.
Thank you.
I can show you a picture of
It says that no objection, concerns raised regarding the access and also the climate stone wall.
That's what I thought it was. Thank you very much.
Okay, coming to you next.
Madam Chairman. Just one clarification, yes, I think the biggest reason this has come to us is because it came through access issues concerned with being those against land, but that is really the only reason it's come to us. Thank you. I'll base that then, Madam Chairman. Again, through the reasons for the recommendations, the report again, another very report, very level of national proposals and bring over here. So the information should be granted sustainable development unless specific policies indicate otherwise. Proposal with effect on the design and general visual impact. There is not considered to be any significant harm to neighbourhood residential community, and there are no material planning considerations for one refusal on application. On that basis, Madam Chairman, I'm prepared to propose the grow subject to conditions laid out in the office report.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder, please? David Moore, would you wish to say any more?
Just very briefly, as usual. The only concern I had was the balcony and the overlooking, and I'm glad that the screen is now 1.8 metres. So that was previous application some years ago. Dispute how high these glass balconies should be. So I'm pleased to see that. So I can see no reason why we should not agree. So I second it.
Thank you very much. Okay, I have no further speakers. It's been moved for grant and duly seconded as per the officer recommendation. Those in favour, please. Yeah, that looks unanimous to me. Thank you all very much. So moving back to the agenda, item 11 is urgent items. You'll be pleased to know there are none. And item 12 is exempt business, and again, there is none. Therefore, at 12:21, I will close the meeting. Thank you all for your time this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.